you doing?
Today is supposed to be a beautiful day. Over the last week, I've had a lot of extra time to reflect on the past year and make some plans for the upcoming one. After a quick count of my big square bales, it looks like I'm right on track for my hay consumption for the year. Thankfully, I did invest in some extra hay, which has come in super handy since getting Pearl. She is eating about 2 to 3 times the amount of hay a normal horse gets. While we've had a few cold days, we really haven't had the intense cold that typically comes along with living in Montana. With us getting closer to the end of January, I have about 2 more months of real winter time before I can breathe a little bit easier. I figure the easiest way to do this is just to go around and visit all of the horses and tell you what my plans for them are this year.
Hey, Sue.
Stewie is one that I had been putting off his training
Your ears?
in hopes that he would grow a little bit more, but I think at this
Yeah.
point this is probably as tall as he's going to get. He is 6 years old this year,
Stu.
and I had planned on starting him over the summer, but time just kind of got away from me. So this coming
Stewie,
spring
come on.
and summer, I will
Crazy.
definitely spend a lot more time riding this guy. He has a really solid foundation. He came to me untouched, so everything he's ever learned, I have taught him. With it warming up a little bit, he is getting
Stewie.
into a bit of
Stewie.
mischief these days.
Come on, scoot your booty, buddy. Hey, Gus.
This spring and summer, I also hope to ride this guy more.
Hey, Peter.
Little Gus is a pretty sensitive horse, and he came with his own set of problems that I think I've pretty much resolved now.
Pete.
Pete is a little bit in the same boat as Gus. He has been a bit of a tough nut to crack, and over the past several years, I've
Pete.
done a lot of work with him, but
You're all
never
right.
really took seriously his under saddle training.
Stewie. You okay, Pete?
I do think over the last 6 months or so, Pete has finally started to mature mentally.
Why, Pete?
For horses like Pete that do not respond to typical training that can be a little bit on the aggressive side, I have found that it does cause kind of a mental delay for
Why,
them.
Pete?
Since I really have no plans of selling Pete, I haven't been in a big rush to ride him regularly. He has been started under saddle. He has several really good rides, but he does still have a lot of fear just around being handled in general. I have high hopes that this year, maybe Pete will find the courage to tackle some more advanced training.
Hey, Whip.
Whiplash has also gotten just a handful of rides. When I purchased Whiplash, I actually bought him to be a stallion prospect. Whiplash was left mostly unhandled for 17 years.
Whip.
Whiplash is an extremely well-bred horse, but he was not handled for most of the 17 years before I got him. Stewie, on the other hand,
Stewie?
is getting himself into too much mischief, and he really just needs to be in
Stewie.
some kind of program where he's getting used.
Stewie. Watch your head. Watch it.
It's really interesting to see the difference between a horse like Stewie and Pete. While I did buy Stewie unhandled from an auction, he has blossomed into a really outgoing, confident horse. Part of that, of course, is just how he is naturally, and then the other part is he has had proper training all throughout his life. While his previous owners didn't actively train him, they treated him fairly, so he doesn't have any fear around humans. Pete, on the other hand, was handled pretty aggressively when he was started, and that has
Hi,
really
bud.
stuck with him for the last couple of years. While little Gus came to me broke, he did have a lot of physical
Well,
limitations that I have dealt with. One of the things that continues to be a problem for him is how sore his back gets. This guy has been tested for all the genetic diseases linked to different muscle problems, and he doesn't have any of those. He is generally a very anxious horse, and I think that has a little bit to do with how tight his muscles always are. I think keeping him on a regular riding schedule would really benefit his muscles, so that's something that I plan on doing in the springtime.
Bye, Pete.
One of the reasons I decided to start a YouTube channel is because I was getting burnt out rehabbing so many horses over the year. In the past, I'd like to get one horse every 60 days and just kind of keep doing that the whole entire year. Because I do have so many permanent residents now, it does make it very tricky to carve out enough time for everybody. Because I know these horses that I own are always going to have everything they need and are now safe from ending up in a bad place, I spend a little bit less time with them. This upcoming year, I'm going to try and prioritize more of my time for these guys and less on rehabbing other people's horses. Sometimes I do feel really guilty spending more time with the horses that I actually own. There are so many horses out there that need help, and I do have a very particular set of skills that not everybody has. I do feel a little bit obligated to use them as much as I can. But now that I have started putting a lot of my rehab adventures on YouTube, I think maybe that tips the scale in my favor and I can feel a little bit better about spending more time with my own horses. It's always really cool when you guys send me an email or leave me a little comment that my videos have inspired you to maybe rescue a horse or get back into the horses.
See?
Obviously, that is not something that everybody's going to be able to do. I love that you guys just stick around to see how the horses are doing. In 2024, I was able to pull just 2 horses, Ziggy and Pearl. It is kind of crazy. Today you can see some steam coming off the horses. They are nice and toasty warm. It is a little bit above freezing today. These boys do have plenty of hay, but they're just snacking throughout the day because they don't actually need the forage to stay warm. Stewie in particular has a little bit of extra cushion on him this time of year, so he is a little bit extra warm. I've been rehabbing horses for a really long time, and it seems like the longer I do it, the harder it gets to rehome them when I'm done with them. Especially the older ones like Ziggy and Pearl that do require a little bit of extra help to stay in good body condition and comfortable.
Hey, girl.
When I purchased Pearl, I really wasn't sure whether or not she was going to make it, but I'm happy to say that these days she is looking so much better. Even with the much colder weather we've been starting to have, she is still able to maintain her weight that she's recently put on. I would put her at about a body score 4, maybe 4.5 right now. It can be a little bit hard to evaluate a horse like Pearl because she does still have a pretty large belly from all of the years she spent making babies. The edema on her midline is not completely resolved. There still is a little bit of evidence there, but it is looking so much better. Her melanomas seem to be holding steady. They don't appear to be getting any larger as of lately. Her legs are also not as swollen as they used to be. I'd say they're pretty close to normal now. The medication that I started her on for her PPID can take a few months to work, so even though I've seen some initial improvements, I think it is probably going to improve quite a bit more by springtime. Recently, I've actually bumped down the amount of senior feed she's getting. I think she actually does not need it. Since she is on all-you-can-eat alfalfa, I think she's getting plenty of calories for her body weight at this current time. She's still getting a little bit of senior feed in with some soaked warm beet pulp and then her vitamin and minerals along with her PPID medications. I do have a long-term anti-inflammatory that I got for her from the vet, but she actually has not started it yet. She did seem a little bit painful when I first got her, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that she was literally starving. Now that she is plumped up again, I think she is feeling so much better. I still am really surprised about how much improvement she's seen over just 2 months. Since we are now in a new year, technically she is 27 years old. I've been getting a lot of questions about when I'm going to introduce this girl to some friends, and really right now she still does need to focus on getting the proper nutrition. If I do introduce her to any new horse friends, there is the potential that there will be some competition for food, but she does not need right now. She also still does have quite a significant amount of exercise intolerance. She gets very tired and winded anytime she trots around. Any horse that I put her with, no matter how calm and docile they are, there is the risk that they'll run her around for a little bit. At this point in time, even though she's physically looking a lot better, I think there are still some things that need to improve before she's turned out with other horses.
Girl.
I was really looking forward to turning her out on the grass in the spring, but that is something I'm going to have to be very careful about because she does have PPID. Thankfully, she is not insulin resistant, so there is the possibility that she can go out on grass very limitedly at certain times during the day, just to make sure she's not getting too much starch. These older horses do present a lot of challenges, so it's important that I look at everything as a whole before I make any decisions about their care.
Playing?
Thankfully, Ziggy and Scarlet seem to be getting along pretty well. Ziggy does tend to run her off of the food piles in the beginning, but after a while they settle in and both of them are able to get all of the hay that they need. For the upcoming year, I have a lot of things I can work with Scarlet on. She really is only 2 years old, so there's not a lot that I can do with her in terms of riding, but I can prepare her by doing a lot of other things like ground driving and ponying. I would love to have Ziggy pony her out on the trail, but really Ziggy is not broke enough to handle that task. There is a lot more skill involved in ponying a young, rambunctious horse like Scarlet, and Ziggy just does not have a good enough handle on him to be up to that task. In 2025, I hope to do a much better job of getting these horses hauled out to different locations and maybe going to some horse shows. That would be a really good experience for Scarlet to have since she's really never left the property. For Ziggy, I'd really like to get him legged up and do some endurance riding this summer. Even if we don't get to do an actual endurance ride, I think our trail riding schedule for this summer is going to look a lot better than it did last year.
Hey, Goosey.
As far as these 3 boys are concerned, I would like to get Goose and Studman out a little bit more. Goose is kind of in the same boat as Pete. He is just very reactive and overly flighty about a lot of things, even though I've owned him for quite a while now. I have ridden him a handful of times, but he is quite an explosive horse, and he is one that my husband does not like me riding if I'm by myself. It would be really nice if we could find a place to buy where my husband could have his eyeballs on me all the time. I know a lot of people ride by themselves regularly, but for me, it's just a little bit too dangerous with some of the horses I have. In the event that I fall off and get knocked out, I would be laying in the snow for a very long time before anyone ever found me. As I've grown older, I have gotten a little bit more aware about how fragile life can be sometimes, so it's always good to have someone around when you're riding horses that may react in a kind of negative way. The same thing kind of goes for Studman. He can be a little bit on the reactive side, especially when working under saddle, because it's something that he gets really anxious about. Big Gus, on the other hand, is a very sensible horse. He has never done anything wrong as long as I've had him.
Buddy.
He is one that I got from his breeder, and I started him under saddle when he was 3.5, I think. He has never had a very heavy workload. I just hop on him and ride him around when I need an easy ride. Even though he's been a really easy horse to get along with, he is not the most people-friendly guy. He would probably rather be left alone. Another thing that I'm going to try and address in 2025 is Studman's metabolic state. The little fat pads above his eyeballs let me know that he is really struggling to keep a normal amount of weight on. He has been tested for PPID and insulin resistance, which both came back negative, but obviously he's having some kind of metabolic trouble. His feet have always been a little bit tricky to maintain because he is a little bit more susceptible to laminitis than the other horses. That is one of the reasons he is separate. These boys do get a little bit more grass hay that is lower in starch than the alfalfa. It looks like these boys have plenty of leftovers for the rest of the day. This upcoming year, another thing that I'm going to try a little bit harder to do is kind of dial in the feeding program for these horses. I do get all of their hay balanced, so they're getting the right kind of minerals and vitamins. The ration balancer I use is specifically formulated for horses that get mostly alfalfa hay. Recently, I've been mixing some soaked beet pulp in with all of the horses' feed just to prevent choke while it's a little bit colder out. Ziggy did choke this fall, and I'm pretty sure it's just because he had his tooth pulled and he was back on hard feed too soon after that happened. But it has changed the way I think about feeding the horses recently, so I'm going to try and come up with a way that maybe they're just getting beet pulp or alfalfa pellets and then their minerals and vitamins on top. Getting rid of all of the concentrated feed that I'm giving these horses, like the ration balancer, may be just the thing that Studman needs to start maintaining a more normal weight. Once I'm able to start working him more regularly, that should help as well. Because I've been having so much trouble with my back, it would also be really helpful if I didn't have to carry heavy bags of feed. Most of these horses get between 1 and 2 pounds of ration balancer a day, so that really adds up. If I fed a little bit of soaked beet pulp or pellets with a bulk mineral, it would save me lugging around lots of heavy bags of feed. These 3 boys, who are a little bit more sensitive metabolically, could stand to do away with their ration balancer. Even with the cooler temperatures, they really just do not need the extra calories. The temperatures for the rest of the week are supposed to be in the high 30s, so Pearl is enjoying a lot more time with her blankets off. I still am worried about her losing weight really quickly if the temperature dips down, so she is getting her blanket on at night. But during the day, when it's above about 25 degrees, she just does not need it. She does also seem to have relatively sensitive skin, so if her blankets are on when she's too hot, She does get really itchy. Before I put her blankets back on later this evening, I will give her another really good brush. I would really love to get this girl into a heated wash rack, but at this point in time, I don't know that that is going to be possible. Her skin and hair coat definitely look a lot better than when I bought her, but I think there's still some room for improvement. I did start her on some flaxseed oil, but she did seem to have just a little bit of trouble digesting it, so I took her off of that for now. I do have just some regular ground flaxseed that I'm going to try that might be the right alternative for her. A lot of horses just have a really hard time processing any kinds of oil. She still is on a relatively high dose of vitamin E, so that should still be helping her quite a bit. For the other seniors that I look after, their plan for the next year is going to be relatively simple. Nigel and Frisco Bill are still just going to hang out. They've both been on PPID medication since the fall, so I'm interested to see how they'll shed out in the spring. When I make it back to the barn later in the afternoon, it looks like Tiny is really wondering what has been taking me so long.
Tiny, come on.
The only other horse that I have plans for this upcoming year is Primrose. I don't really show her very much on the channel, mostly because I don't want you guys to get attached to her. Before I had my YouTube channel, every horse that I bought to rehab, I would need to move along to a new home. That is the main reason that I was able to rehab so many horses. After my initial investment, the finished horses basically pay for themselves, then I can do it with another. Since starting YouTube, however, it has opened up a lot more doors for me. A lot of these horses are basically paying their own upkeep, so if I really wanted to keep Primrose, I definitely could. I've thought a lot about replacing Frisco Bill the last couple of years, and there's a good possibility that Primrose would be the horse to do that. A huge milestone that is going to happen this year is Frisco will turn 30 years old. That is something that really doesn't happen to a lot of horses, so I'm really happy that this old guy is still around.
Frisco Bill.
He pretty much does whatever he wants around here. He has put up with a lot of my shenanigans over the years, so a really easy retirement is the least I can do for him. Along with Frisco Bill, Nigel will also be just hanging out, enjoying his retirement. And I'm really hopeful that these two old boys can get their own private pastures when we get our new place, hopefully this year. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.